I never imagined I'd be the mother standing outside her only child's wedding, the same wedding I paid for, every single penny of it, listening to my son say I do through a cold church wall while strangers sat in the front row where I was supposed to be. I could hear the music. I could hear the laughter. I could even hear the bride's mother giggling about how perfect everything was. Perfect, because I wasn't in the picture to embarrass them. They didn't want me, the woman who held my son's hand when he was sick, the one who skipped meals so he could eat, the one who worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs so he could go to college and wear nice shoes. I paid for the dress. I paid for the food. I paid for the flowers, the same flowers that brushed against the bride's lace train as she waltzed down an aisle I wasn't allowed to walk. All I wanted was to see my boy's face light up with happiness, to see him become a husband. But when the day came, I was good enough to foot the bill, but not good enough to sit among family. But they didn't know me as well as they thought they did. They didn't know that the same woman who gave up everything for her son would be the same woman to take it all back, and more. So, tell me, if you were standing outside your own child's wedding, after paying for every last sparkle and bow, what would you do? Because this is what I did. My name is Helen. And if you'd met me 5 years ago, you'd probably say I was the kind of mom who spoiled her only child a little too much. When my husband left, or rather, when I finally got tired of his gambling and his fists, my son Jacob was just 6 years old. I still remember how small his hand was when he held mine at the bus stop. How he'd squeeze my fingers 3 times. I love you. Back then, we didn't have much. We shared a tiny 2-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. Every morning I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to open the bakery down the street, then hurry to my second job at the diner. Sometimes, when money got tight, I'd sell my old jewelry just to keep the lights on. But no matter how tired I was, I made sure Jacob had what he needed: new shoes for school, hot meals, books, tutors, field trips. I even paid for piano lessons he begged for and later dropped after 2 months. When other kids teased him for not having the latest phone or the flashiest sneakers, I'd save for weeks to surprise him with one for Christmas. Watching his eyes light up made every missed meal worth it. There were nights I'd come home with my back aching and my feet numb, only to find him asleep at the kitchen table, his little face pressed against his homework. I'd carry him to bed and whisper promises into his hair: "You're gonna have the life I never did, baby. You're gonna be somebody." And he was. Jacob was bright, polite, teachers loved him, neighbors praised him. When he got into college on a partial scholarship, I cried so hard I almost scared him. But tuition still needed topping up, so I took out a loan, picked up extra shifts, skipped the small treats I used to allow myself: no new clothes, no trips, no nights out with friends. It was all for him. Always for him. When he graduated, I stood in the crowd, clutching a bouquet I'd bought with tips. I remember thinking, it's all been worth it. He'll remember who stood by him. I thought I'd raised a good man. I thought he'd never forget. But I was wrong. Jacob got his first real job about 6 months after college, nothing fancy, but enough to move out and get his own tiny apartment. I helped him furnish it, of course, used up my last tax refund on a couch he picked out and a little dining set. I didn't mind. I loved seeing him stand on his own. I loved feeling like all those years of struggle had built something solid, a young man with his head on straight. Then, about a year later, he brought her home. Hannah. I remember the first time I met her, standing on my front porch, soft smile, expensive bag hanging off her arm like a trophy. She was beautiful, no doubt, long shiny hair, polished nails, delicate little gold bracelet. She hugged me, but her eyes were already sizing up my curtains, my old carpet, the chipped paint on my kitchen cupboards. She called me Mrs. Randall even though I said, "Please, call me Helen." I'd make her tea and she'd thank me with this polite smile that never reached her eyes. Jacob looked at her like she'd hung the stars. He couldn't stop touching her hand, playing with her hair, asking if she was okay, if she wanted anything. At first, I thought it was sweet, young love and all. But the more time I spent with Hannah, the more I felt invisible. One night, Jacob sat me down at the kitchen table. He was so excited, his knee bouncing under the chair. He told me he'd proposed. She said yes. They were going to have a dream wedding. I remember laughing, saying, "Well, you two better start saving, weddings cost a fortune." He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, we were hoping you'd help. Help. Not pitch in a little." No, what he really meant was pay for the whole thing. They wanted a big wedding, the fancy venue in town, the string quartet, the 5-course meal. Hannah's parents, they said, were more comfortable handling the honeymoon expenses. I felt this twinge of something, resentment, maybe, but I pushed it aside. This was my baby's wedding. I'd always dreamed of seeing him in a tux, standing at the altar, starting a new chapter. So I did what I always did. I said yes. I cashed out my small retirement fund, the one I'd been growing for 20 years so I wouldn't have to work until I was 80. I even sold my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only heirloom my mother left me. It hurt, but love makes you do foolish things, doesn't it? At first, I told myself it would all be worth it. I went to every bridal shop visit, every cake tasting, every florist appointment. I sat beside Hannah and her mother, Linda, a woman who wore perfume so strong I'd get a headache after an hour, while they flipped through catalogs of centerpieces that cost more than my first car. But it didn't take long to see exactly where I stood. My ideas? They were quaint, sweet, but not really the vibe. I'd suggest a cheaper option, maybe we don't need custom calligraphy on the invitations? And Hannah's mom would sigh dramatically, whisper something to Hannah, then flash me a smile like I was a child piping up in grown folks' business. It got worse when the seating chart came up. I'd always imagined I'd be front row, right behind my son, where any mother should be. But one evening, while I was sorting through vendor invoices, I spotted my name buried in the second row, near the aisle, behind Hannah's aunt and some distant cousins. I thought surely it was a mistake. So I asked. Linda barely looked up from her wine glass. "Oh, we just thought it would be more balanced this way. The front row should really be the bride's immediate family, it'll look better in photos." Photos. I was paying for the photos, too. I turned to Jacob, my own flesh and blood, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just rubbed the back of his neck and said, "It's not a big deal, Mom. It's Hannah's big day. Let's not make waves." I swallowed it down. Told myself it was just a chair. Just a detail. Then came the music. They changed the song I'd always dreamed would play while he walked in, the same song I sang to him as a baby. Hannah said it was too old-fashioned. They picked something trendy instead. My opinions faded into the background like wallpaper. I was there to write checks and smile, nothing more. I started to feel like a stranger at my own son's celebration. But I still held on. I told myself, it'll be worth it to see him happy. To stand there and watch him promise forever. But when the big day came, I learned exactly where I really stood in my son's new life. And trust me, they'd regret showing me. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat up at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope that held the final payment for the caterer, the biggest check I'd ever written in my life. I told myself it was fine, tomorrow, I'd sit in that chapel, watch my boy smile at his bride, and maybe all the hurt feelings would melt away. Maybe they'd see me for who I was, the mother who made it all possible. Around noon, I drove to the venue for the rehearsal. I'd baked a batch of Jacob's favorite cookies, oatmeal raisin, just like when he was little, and wrapped them up in foil. Silly, maybe, but I thought, maybe we'd have a small moment, just the two of us. When I arrived, people were already milling around, the florist tweaking flower arches, the planner barking orders. I spotted Hannah's mother first. She gave me a once-over, took in my sensible flats, my bargain store dress. Her eyes flicked to the foil-wrapped cookies like I'd brought a dead rat. I found Jacob standing with Hannah near the altar. I called his name. He looked at me, and for a second, just for a heartbeat, he smiled. My little boy was still in there somewhere. I held out the cookies, and Hannah's face twisted before she even opened her mouth. "Oh, that's sweet, Helen, but the catering is all set." We don't really want outside food confusing the staff. She laughed like it was a joke. Jacob laughed too, a thin, nervous chuckle. Then they turned away. Just like that. I wandered back toward the seating area. I needed air. That's when I heard them. Hannah and her mother, whispering behind a half-closed door. Linda's voice dripped with scorn. Did you see her? Bringing those cookies. So tacky. I'm glad we moved her back a row. God forbid she ruins the photos. Hannah giggled, my future daughter-in-law, the woman I'd emptied my bank account for, and said, honestly, I wish she'd just stay home. She's so provincial. Provincial. That word sat on my tongue like poison. I turned to leave, and nearly bumped right into Jacob. He heard it too. I looked him straight in the eyes. Jacob, is this really what you want? He couldn't even hold my gaze. He just mumbled, it's complicated, Mom. Just don't make it harder than it has to be, okay? That's when I knew. I was nothing more than a checkbook, a charity case they tolerated long enough to squeeze dry. I went home that night, crawled into bed with my dress for the wedding hanging on my closet door, the same dress I'd bought secondhand, pressed and mended by hand, and cried until the sun came up. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before dawn. My hands shook as I put on my makeup, careful strokes to hide the bags under my eyes, the redness from too many tears. I told myself, hold your head up. Smile for Jacob. You're his mother. Nothing can take that from you. I arrived at the venue early, clutching my small purse with tissues, lipstick, and the final check for the catering tucked inside. The ushers bustled around, greeting guests, pinning boutonnieres on suits. I stood at the entrance, scanning the hall for Jacob. He was nowhere to be seen. One of the young ushers, a boy who couldn't have been more than 18, approached me. His face was red, nervous. He kept his eyes on the floor. Excuse me, ma'am. There's been a change. A change? I asked, trying to steady my voice. He cleared his throat. The seating chart. You're not on it anymore. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that didn't sound like me at all. Not on it? What do you mean? I'm the groom's mother. He winced. I'm really sorry, ma'am. The bride's parents said it's for balance, family unity, or something. They asked that you maybe watch from the overflow room? Overflow room. Like I was a distant cousin who didn't RSVP on time. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Where's Jacob? Get Jacob. But Jacob didn't come. Instead, Hannah's father showed up, broad shoulders stuffed into an expensive suit, cologne so thick it made my eyes water. He gave me a look that made my skin crawl. Helen, it's best for everyone if you don't make a scene today. Let's not ruin Hannah's big moment, There's a nice lounge at the back, plenty of refreshments. You can watch from there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear down the flowers, throw their fancy programs into the fountain, grab my son by the ear like I used to when he lied about eating cookies before dinner. Instead, I felt my body go cold. I looked him dead in the eye and said nothing. I just turned around and walked out, past the stunned guests, past the flower girl practicing her steps, past the quartet tuning their instruments with my money. I stood outside the heavy church doors as the music swelled. I heard the vows, the laughter, the cheer when they kissed. I pressed my hand against the cold stone wall and wondered if my son even thought of me at that moment. Did he wonder where his mother was? Or was he too busy smiling for the camera, the perfect new family lined up behind him, while I stood alone in the parking lot? But here's the thing about people like me, people who sacrifice everything and get spit on for it. We learn. We learn to stand back up. And when we do, you better pray we don't get angry. Because that's the day I decided they'd regret every single flower, every single bite of cake, every single dime of my money they thought they could steal without consequence. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the church door while guests trickled out with their tiny satin favor bags and smug little smiles. No one looked twice at me. Why would they? To them, I was just some middle-aged woman sitting alone in a beat-up sedan. In that quiet bubble, engine ticking, my lipstick smudged, tissues damp in my fist, something inside me snapped clean in half. All those years I'd bent over backward, worked weekends, holidays, skipped meals so Jacob could eat. All the birthdays I'd spent standing behind a cake I could barely afford, watching him blow out candles and whisper wishes he never shared. Also, he could look me dead in the face and say, "You don't belong here." Fine. He didn't want me there? Then I'd show him what it looked like when I wasn't there, really wasn't. I went home, peeled off my carefully pressed dress, and sat down at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop. Opened my bank account. Opened my email. First, I called the caterer. The final payment? It hadn't cleared yet. The check was sitting on my hall table in my purse. So I told them there'd been a mistake, cancel the check. No payment was coming. They'd have to talk to the groom for their money. Next, the florist. Same story. They'd been paid in deposits only, the balance was due on delivery. Well, guess what? The wedding was done. The roses were dead. Time to settle up, with my dear son and his brand new in-laws. The band. The rental company. The fancy custom linens. The bartender. All those sweet, smiling vendors who'd lined up to shake my hand when I signed the contracts? Now they'd line up at Jacob and Hannah's doorstep instead, looking for thousands. And the best part? They couldn't sue me for a penny. The contracts were in my name, but the final bills were conditional on final payment, and they'd used everything already. Good luck explaining that to small claims court. Next came the honeymoon. See, Hannah's parents bragged for weeks about the fancy 2-week resort in the Maldives. But the flights? The upgrades? The spa credit? All courtesy of the extra cash I'd wired to Jacob to make it perfect. Funny thing, my bank lets me pull back a wire within 24 hours if I claim fraud. So I did. I told them I'd been scammed by my irresponsible adult son. The clerk almost apologized for me. I got every cent back, down to the last dollar. By midnight, I was lying in bed with my laptop humming on my chest, staring at my empty savings account filling back up. I should have felt empty. I should have felt regret. But all I felt was calm. The next morning, my phone exploded, missed calls from Jacob, voicemails, texts. At first, they were polite. "Hey mom, there's an issue with the florist. Can you call me?" Then, "Mom, please, we need to talk. The caterer says you canceled the check?" And, "What the hell is wrong with you? Call me now." I didn't. I went out for a walk instead, down to the lake where Jacob used to fish when he was 10. I bought myself a coffee. I breathed for the first time in years. By the time I got home, there was a knock on my door. And there they were, Jacob and Hannah, newlyweds standing on my porch in their fancy honeymoon outfits, eyes wide with panic. Jacob's voice cracked first. "Mom, why did you do this? We can't pay them, they're threatening to sue us." Hannah tried to sweeten her tone, that honey drip voice I'd seen her use on her father. "Helen, please. We can't cover this. It'll ruin us. You don't want that, do you?" I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. "Oh, sweetheart. You already ruined yourselves," Jacob begged. Hannah threatened. She called me vindictive, petty, crazy. I stood there on my porch, arms crossed, and said nothing. Finally, Jacob whispered, "Mom, please, we're family. And I swear on everything I have left." I laughed right in his face. "No, Jacob. You made it perfectly clear whose family you belong to. Now let them clean up your mess." We left with nothing, no money, no solution, no pity. And when they turned their backs, that door closed on them like a coffin lid. I thought I'd feel grief. I thought I'd crumble once they were gone. Standing in that empty hallway, all I felt was lighter. For the first time in decades, the weight was theirs, not mine. I thought they'd come crawling back the next day. Maybe a week later. Maybe a month. Maybe Jacob would stand at my door with flowers like when he was little and sorry for breaking a window or stealing cookies. But that little boy was gone, and so was the mother who'd always open the door and say, "It's okay, baby. Mama forgives you." For the first week, I got calls every day, first from Jacob, then Hannah, then Hannah's mother. He called me every name under the sun. Said I'd humiliated them. Said I'd embarrassed the family. Family. That word doesn't sting anymore. Vendors started showing up at Jacob and Hannah's condo, demanding final payments. The caterer threatened legal action. The florist plastered photos online about deadbeat newlyweds. Small town gossip travels fast, faster when you owe people money and your mother has friends who love to talk. Hannah's parents tried to step in at first, but they bragged so loud about not paying for the wedding that everyone knew they'd wash their hands of the bills. So when the invoices piled up, they did what they always did, pushed it onto someone else. But this time, there was no one else. I heard through the grapevine that Jacob tried to get a loan. But banks don't like giving newlyweds big checks when their credit's a mess before the honeymoon is even over. The honeymoon, by the way? Cancelled. Refunds denied. Too bad. Jacob tried to come back to me once more. He knocked on my door at 11 p.m., alone, eyes hollow, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He stood on my porch and asked if he could just come in, just talk, just fix this. I looked at him, really looked at him. My boy? My baby. The same baby I held the night his father left, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and whisper, "Don't let the monsters get me, Mama." And there he was, a grown man who let someone else become the monster. So I told him the truth, "Jacob, I will always love the boy you were. But I don't owe a single thing to the man you chose to become." I told him he was off my accounts, every penny. I told him the inheritance from my father's old house? Gone, donated to a scholarship fund for single mothers like I used to be. I told him he had 2 strong legs and 2 hands. Let Hannah's family show him how family works. He stood there a long time, eyes wet, mouth trembling like he had words he couldn't spit out. Then he turned and walked down my steps. I watched him go, then closed the door. I didn't cry this time. I made myself tea. I slept like I hadn't slept in years. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if maybe I went too far, if maybe I should have just swallowed my pride and paid those last bills to keep the peace. I smile when they ask. Because the truth is, there was never any peace to keep. I think about that wedding sometimes, the flowers I never saw up close, the champagne I never tasted, the seat I never warmed in that front row. I wonder if Jacob ever looks through his wedding album and notices the empty space where his mother should have been. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. I don't lose sleep over it. Hannah's parents? Well, word got around fast that they were the kind of people who'd humiliate the one paying the bills. Small town, big mouths, business deals dried up, old friends drifted away. Reputation is a delicate thing, so easy to crush when the wrong truths slip out of the bright garden party. As for Jacob and Hannah, last I heard, they sold their condo and moved into her parents' basement to dodge the debt collectors. I doubt the fancy in-laws enjoy explaining that to their country club friends. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that little boy who used to squeeze my hand 3 times. I love you. I wish he'd stayed that boy forever. But people change. So did I. And here's the thing no one tells you when you pour yourself out for other people: once you have nothing left to give them, you finally see how little they were willing to give you in return. So I don't regret a thing. If anything, I wish I'd done it sooner. Now, instead of spending my golden years babysitting Hannah's drama and Jacob's spineless apologies, I'm planning a trip to Greece, my first vacation in 30 years. Paid in full, in my name alone. I paid for a wedding, yes, but what I really bought that day was my freedom. And I'd do it all again. So, tell me this, if you were standing in my shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have kept the peace? Or slammed the door and kept your self-respect? I know what I chose. And I'd choose it again. This was my story. If you've ever been burned by the people you love most, Or want to hear more tales where karma does the talking? Hit that subscribe button right now. Stick around. On this channel, betrayal never wins for long.